Rain lashed against the tall glass windows of the Vale estate, turning the view of the city into a blur of silver streaks. Inside, the house was too still, too clean, like a museum built for someone who had already left. The clocks ticked, but time didn't move. It hadn't, not for Adrian Vale. He sat in his late wife's study again, the same place he went every night since the funeral. A single lamp cast a pale pool of light on the desk. Papers lay untouched, a pen rolled to the floor weeks ago, and beside him sat a glass of whiskey gone warm. His reflection in the window stared back at him. Hollow eyes, hair too long, and a face that looked 10 years older than the man in the framed photo on the bookshelf. The one where his wife, Elise, had been laughing with her head thrown back, her hand gripping his arm as if she'd never let go. He whispered something to the picture, the same words he'd said every night. "I'm sorry, Elle." The words were dry, stripped of meaning. He didn't even know what he was apologizing for anymore. The accident, the rain, the fact that he was still breathing. Somewhere down the hall, soft footsteps approached. The sound was light, deliberate. Then a knock. Gentle, careful. "Mr. Vale." The voice was unfamiliar to the house. He looked up, blinking as though he'd forgotten anyone else lived there. Yes. The door opened, and a woman stepped in, mid-20s, hair tied back neatly, wearing the uniform of the household staff. But her expression didn't carry the stiffness of the others. She was new, the nanny he'd hired 3 days ago for Clara. He tried to remember her name. Nora. Yes, Nora something. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said, her tone respectful but soft. "Clara's awake. She had a nightmare." He exhaled, almost a groan. "She has them often." "I know," Nora said. "She asked for you." That made him still. "For me?" "Yes, sir." She hesitated, reading his face. "She said she dreamed about the lake again. She thought you were there." The room seemed to shrink. His throat tightened. He couldn't go through that dream again, not through her eyes. He gripped the edge of the desk and forced his voice steady. "Tell her I'll come in the morning." Nora didn't move. She looked at him for a moment longer, studying the man behind the billionaire title. The silence stretched until she nodded quietly. "Of course." She turned to leave, but at the door, she paused. "She misses you, you know. She doesn't say it much, but she draws you every day." "The same picture." "What picture?" he asked, though his tone was weary, almost annoyed. Nora looked down at her hands, then back at him. "You, sitting in the dark. She says that's where you live now." Adrian's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell her to leave. He wanted to tell her she didn't know what she was talking about. But the words didn't come. He just stared at the rain again, the sound of it filling the space between them. Finally, she spoke, quieter this time. "If you want, I can stay with her tonight. She feels safer when someone reads to her." He nodded absently, and she left without another word. When the door clicked shut, Adrian leaned back in his chair and pressed his palms over his eyes. For a moment, he thought about going to Clara's room, just to see her sleeping, to convince himself she was fine. But the thought of standing by that little pink bed, seeing Elisa's smile in miniature, hearing her tiny voice ask him why mommy wasn't coming home, he couldn't. He didn't have the strength. Outside, thunder rolled, distant but heavy. He sat there for a long time, staring at the shadows shifting on the walls. Somewhere, faintly, he thought he could hear Nora's voice reading a bedtime story down the hall. A melody in the quiet house, soft and patient. Clara's small laugh answered once, bright and fleeting. He closed his eyes. For a moment, just a heartbeat, he almost believed Elise was there again, her laughter echoing with their daughters, her warmth brushing past him like a ghost refusing to let go. Then the sound faded, and he was alone once more, the light flickering, the rain falling harder, as though the world itself refused to stop grieving with him. Morning came reluctantly to the Vale estate. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low over the hills, pressing against the glass walls like an unspoken promise that the storm would return. The light that filtered through was cold and gray, and it made the house look even emptier than it was. Adrian stood in the hallway outside Clara's room, coffee in hand, listening. He hadn't meant to stop. He'd only been passing through on his way to his office, but the sound of laughter, real laughter, had caught him off guard. Inside, Nora's voice floated through the half-open door. "No, Not that one, Clara giggled. That's the wrong crown. The princess wears the gold one. Oh, of course, Nora said with a chuckle. How could I forget? A princess can't wear silver to a royalty. Exactly. Clara's voice was small but full of certainty, that kind of fearless brightness only children carried. Adrian leaned slightly closer. Through the crack, he could see them, his daughter sitting cross-legged on the floor, curls messy, face lit with joy, a paper crown perched crookedly on her head. Nora sat beside her, holding a teapot from Clara's toy set, pretending to pour invisible tea into invisible cups. It was a simple scene, but it hit him like a punch to the chest. Elise had done the same thing, down to the crooked crown and the invisible tea. He used to watch from the doorway, the same way he was now, except back then he'd walk in, sit beside them, let Clara pour him tea, and laugh when Elise called him, Your Majesty. Now, he just stood there, silent, a ghost haunting his own life. Nora looked up suddenly and caught him watching. She didn't say anything, just smiled, small and kind, as if she understood that this was as close as he could get. Then she said softly, Clara, look who's here. Clara turned, eyes lighting up. Daddy. The word startled him. He hadn't heard her call him that in weeks. He froze, every instinct telling him to back away, but Clara was already on her feet, running to him, her small hands reaching out. He set the coffee cup down on the console table before it could spill, and she collided into his legs with a hug that was too fierce for her tiny frame. I dreamed about Mommy again, she said into his shirt. But this time, she was smiling. She told me you were sad because you lost your sunshine. Adrian's throat tightened. He looked over Clara's head at Nora, who watched quietly from the carpet. She said that. Clara nodded, pulling back. She said if I find it, I should give it back to you. Then she frowned. But I don't know where it went. He wanted to say something. Anything, but words failed him. He placed a hand gently on her hair and forced a smile. That's okay, sweetheart. Maybe it'll come back on its own. Clara studied him for a moment, then shrugged and returned to her tea set, as if the matter were settled. Nora stood and began to gather the toys, giving him a brief, searching glance. She's doing better, Nora said softly, keeping her tone light. But she still wakes up at night. Sometimes she calls for her mother. He nodded. She used to do that even before. He trailed off, the rest of the sentence crumbling in his mouth. Nora hesitated, then asked gently, Do you ever go in when she calls? He looked away, jaw tightening. I try not to wake her more. It only makes it worse. I don't think that's true, she said, almost to herself. Sometimes, children just need to know someone's there, even if they're already awake. Her words lingered in the air, heavier than they sounded. He gave no reply. Clara began humming quietly, lost in her make-believe world. Nora smiled at her, then turned back to him. Would you like to join us, Mr. Vale? I make an excellent cup of imaginary tea. It was meant as a joke, but it hit something deep inside him. He looked at the teapot, at his daughter's expectant little face. For a moment, he almost said yes. Almost. But instead, he adjusted his cufflinks and took a step back. Thank you, but I have work to do. Nora's smile didn't fade, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet disappointment, or maybe pity. Of course, sir. He turned and walked away, the echo of his footsteps chasing him down the empty hall. When he reached his study, he stopped, staring at his reflection again in the glass. The rain hadn't returned, but it might as well have. From somewhere behind him, faint and distant, Clara's laughter rose again, soft, bright, full of life. It carried through the halls like sunlight trying to break through storm clouds, and for a brief, fleeting second, Adrian closed his eyes and let himself listen. The house was silent again that night. Too silent. Even the rain seemed afraid to touch the glass. Adrian sat by the fireplace, the flames barely moving, their glow flickering against the polished marble floors. His tie hung loose around his neck, his sleeves rolled up, and a decanter sat half-empty beside him. The rest of the staff had gone home hours ago. Only Nora and Clara remained, asleep upstairs, or so he thought. His eyes were fixed on the fire, but his mind was somewhere else, on the lake. That cursed, still stretch of water where the car had slid off the road, where Elise's laughter had turned into screams, where his world had ended in the cold dark beneath the surface. He hadn't gone back there since the funeral. But the memory was always waiting. He stood abruptly, as if trying to escape his own thoughts, and poured another drink. His hand trembled. The glass hit the table too hard and cracked, a fine spiderweb spreading through the crystal. He stared at it for a long moment, then muttered, "Perfect." Behind him, a voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." He turned sharply. Nora stood in the doorway, barefoot, wrapped in a soft gray cardigan. Her expression wasn't pity, it was concern, plain and steady. "I didn't hear you come in," he said, voice rough. "I heard the glass," she replied, stepping closer. "And I saw your light from the hall." He sighed. "You should be resting. So should you." Something in her tone, gentle but unyielding, made him look at her properly. Her hair was loose, her eyes tired but calm. She looked nothing like the staff he hired. There was no distance, no caution. She spoke to him like he was just a man, not a billionaire, not a tragedy. "I know what tonight is," she said quietly. "It's been a year, hasn't it?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence told her everything. "I can't imagine what it's like to lose someone like that," Nora continued, coming nearer. "But your daughter, she's still here. She's trying so hard to reach you." "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't talk about her. She cries for you, Adrian." His name caught him off guard. It had been months since anyone had said it that way. "She thinks you're angry with her because she survived and her mother didn't." He flinched, as if struck. "That's not true. But that's what she feels," Nora pressed softly. "And you're the only one who can show her it isn't." He shook his head, pacing away. "You think I haven't tried? Every time I look at her, I see Elise. Every smile, every word, it's like she's still here, and then I remember she's not. I can't live in that space." His voice cracked. "You don't understand what that does to a man." "I understand loneliness," she said simply. "And I understand what it looks like when someone is ready to give up." He turned, eyes blazing. "And what do you think you can do about it?" Nora hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe nothing. But maybe I can remind you what's left before you throw it away." He stared at her, chest heaving. For the first time in a year, he didn't look like a man made of stone. He looked human, broken, fragile, terrified. She took one small step forward, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not the only one who lost her that day." He swallowed hard, the air trembling between them. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, as if the storm had found them again. And without another word, he turned and walked toward the door, toward the lake. The lake was a sheet of black glass beneath a bruised sky. The air was cold enough to sting, and the trees along the shore shivered under the wind. Adrian stood at the water's edge, coat unbuttoned, hair whipped across his face. The ring in his hand gleamed faintly under the moonlight, a thin circle of gold that once meant forever. He hadn't meant to come here. His car had driven itself, guided by grief and memory. Every turn of the winding road felt like a heartbeat pulling him closer to her. Now, staring at the lake, he felt the same pull, quiet, heavy, irresistible. He closed his fist around the ring and whispered, "I'm coming home, Elle." The words were simple, almost calm. He took a step forward. The water lapped against his shoes, cold as the night she died. "Adrian." The voice cut through the wind. He froze, turning sharply. Nora was there, running toward him, her coat flapping open, her hair soaked from the mist. She stumbled once on the wet grass but didn't stop. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, though his voice came out hoarse, almost broken. "I followed you," she said, breathless. "You shouldn't be alone. I told you." "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't tell me to leave you." "Not here." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You don't understand. This is where it ended." Nora's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "No, this is where you stopped living." He shook his head. "You think I want this? You think I chose to drown every day in what's left of her?" His voice cracked, raw with pain. "I wake up and see her in everything. Our daughter's smile, her voice, even the silence. And I can't," he faltered, looking down at the water again. "I can't carry it anymore." Nora stepped closer, the mud sucking at her shoes. Then don't carry it alone. He laughed bitterly. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. She moved until she was only a few feet away, her voice barely rising above the wind. I see it in Clara. She's waiting for you to come back, Adrian. Every night she draws the three of you by the lake, her, you, and her mother. But in every picture, you're standing in the dark. His hand trembled. Because that's where I belong. No, she shook her head, her eyes fierce now. That's where you've been hiding. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the water. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian took another step toward the edge, his shoes sinking deeper into the mud. Nora, he whispered, I can't do this anymore. She reached out, voice breaking but certain. Then listen to me. He turned halfway toward her, the reflection of the lake trembling between them. She stepped closer and whispered, almost like a prayer, she left you her heartbeat, you just keep refusing to listen. The words hit him, harder than the cold ever could. He stared at her, chest tightening, his pulse pounding in his ears. For a moment, all he heard was the rush of wind and water, and beneath it, faint but real, Clara's laughter in his memory. He dropped the ring. It hit the surface with a small sound and disappeared. Then he turned and fell to his knees, sobbing, not for Elise, but for himself, for the man he'd become. Nora knelt beside him, silent, letting him break open at last. When the first light of dawn touched the lake, Adrian was still there, his daughter's heartbeat echoing softly in his chest, steady and alive.